excuse to meet me in the corridor, and besought my notice by a demeanour and look subdued to helot humility, I could not love, I could scarcely pity her. To answer briefly and dryly some interesting inquiry about my health, to pass her by with a stern bow, was all I could. Her presence and manner had then, and for some time previously, and consequently, a singular effect upon me. They sealed up all that was good, elicited all that was noxious in my nature. Sometimes they enervated my senses, but they always hardened my heart. I was aware of the detriment done, and quarrelled with myself for the change. I had ever hated a tyrant, and behold, the possession of a slave, self-given, went near to transform me into what I abhorred. There was at once a sort of low gratification in receiving this luscious incense from an attractive and still young worshipper, and an irritating sense of degradation in the very experience of this pleasure. When she stole about me with the soft step of a slave, I felt at once barbarous and sensual as a pasha. I endured her homage sometimes, sometimes I rebuked it. My indifference or harshness served equally to increase the evil I desired to check. Que le dédain lui sied bien, I once overheard her say to her mother. Il est beau comme Apollon quand il sourit de son air hautain. And the jolly old dame laughed, and said she thought her daughter was bewitched, for I had no point of a handsome man about me, except being straight and without deformity. Pour moi, she continued, il me fait tout l'effet d'un chat huant avec ses besicles. Worthy old girl, I could have gone and kissed her, had she not been a little too old, too fat, and too red-faced. Her sensible, truthful words seemed so wholesome, contrasted with the morbid illusions of her daughter. When Pelet awoke on the morning after his frenzy fit, he retained no recollection of what had happened the previous night, and his mother fortunately had the discretion to refrain from informing him that I had been a witness of his degradation. He did not again have recourse to wine for curing his griefs, but even in his sober mood he soon showed that the iron of jealousy had entered into his soul. A thorough Frenchman, the national characteristic of ferocity had not been omitted by nature in compounding the ingredients of his character. It had appeared first in his access of drunken wrath, when some of his demonstrations of hatred to my person were of a truly fiendish character, and now it was more covertly betrayed by momentary contractions of the features, and flashes of fierceness in his light blue eyes, when their glance chanced to encounter mine. He absolutely avoided speaking to me. I was now spared even the falsehood of his politeness. In this state of our mutual relations, my soul rebelled sometimes, almost ungovernably, against living in the house, and discharging the service of such a man. But who is free from the constraint of circumstances? At that time I was not. I used to rise each morning eager to shake off his yoke, and go out with my portmanteau under my arm, if a beggar, at least a freeman; and in the evening, when I came back from the pensionnat de demoiselles, a certain pleasant voice in my ear, a certain face so intelligent yet so docile, so reflective yet so soft in my eyes, a certain cast of character at once proud and pliant, sensitive and sagacious, serious and ardent in my head, a certain tone of feeling, fervid and modest, refined and practical, pure and powerful, delighting and troubling my memory, visions of new ties I longed to contract, of new duties I longed to undertake, had taken the rover and the rebel out of me, and had shown endurance of my hated lot in the light of a Spartan virtue. But Pelet's fury subsided. A fortnight sufficed for its rise, progress, and extinction. In that space of time, the dismissal of the obnoxious teacher had been effected in the neighbouring house, and in the same interval I had declared my resolution to follow and find out my pupil, and upon my application for her address being refused, I had summarily resigned my own post. This last act seemed at once to restore Mademoiselle Reuter to her senses. Her sagacity, her judgment, so long misled by a fascinating delusion, struck again into the right track the moment that delusion vanished. By the right track I do not mean the steep and difficult path of principle, in that path she never trod, but the plain highway of common sense, from which she had of late widely diverged. When there, she carefully sought, and having found, industriously pursued the trail of her old suitor, Monsieur Pelet. She soon overtook him. What arts she employed to soothe and blind him I know not, but she succeeded both in allaying his wrath and hoodwinking his discernment, as was soon proved by the alteration in his mien and manner. She must have managed to convince him that I neither was, nor ever had been, a rival of his; for the fortnight of fury against me terminated in a fit of exceeding graciousness and amenity, not unmixed with a dash of exulting self-complacency, more ludicrous than irritating. Pelet's bachelor life had been passed in proper French style, with due disregard to moral restraint, and I thought his married life promised to be very French also. He often boasted to me what a terror he had been to certain husbands of his acquaintance. I perceived it would not now be difficult to pay him back in his own coin. The crisis drew on. No sooner had the holidays commenced than note of preparation for some momentous event sounded all through the premises of Pelet. Painters, polishers, and upholsterers were immediately set to work, and there was talk of la chambre de madame, le salon de madame. Not deeming it probable that the old duenna, at present graced with that title in our house, had inspired her son with such enthusiasm of filial piety as to induce him to fit up apartments expressly for her use, I concluded, in common with the cook, the two housemaids, and the kitchen scullion, that a new and more juvenile madame was destined to be the tenant of these gay chambers. Presently official announcement of the coming event was put forth. In another week's time, Monsieur Francois Pelet, directeur, and Mademoiselle Zoraide Reuter, directrice, were to be joined together in the bands of matrimony. Monsieur, in person, heralded the fact to me, terminating his communication by an obliging expression of his desire that I should continue, as heretofore, his ablest assistant and most trusted friend, and a proposition to raise my salary by an additional 200 francs per annum. I thanked him, gave no conclusive answer at the time, and when he had left me, threw off my blouse, put on my coat, and set out on a long walk outside the Porte de Flandre, in order, as I thought, to cool my blood, calm my nerves, and shake my disarranged ideas into some order. In fact, I had just received what was virtually my dismissal. I could not conceal, I did not desire to conceal from myself the conviction that, being now certain that Mademoiselle Reuter was destined to become Madame Pelet, it would not do for me to remain a dependent dweller in the house which was soon to be hers. Her present demeanour towards me was deficient neither in dignity nor propriety, but I knew her former feeling was unchanged. Decorum now repressed, and policy masked it, but opportunity would be too strong for either of these, temptation would shiver their restraints. I was no pope, I could not boast infallibility. In short, if I stayed, the probability was that in 3 months' time a practical modern French novel would be in full process of concoction under the roof of the unsuspecting Pelet. Now, modern French novels are not to my taste, either practically or theoretically. Limited as had yet been my experience of life, I had once had the opportunity of contemplating near at hand an example of the results produced by a course of interesting and romantic domestic treachery. No golden halo of fiction was about this example. I saw it bare and real, and it was very loathsome. I saw a mind degraded by the practice of mean subterfuge, by the habit of perfidious deception, and a body